today, let's get right into it, because we don't have very much time, I don't feel. Not like today for the services. We got enough time today for the services, but not enough just as a church. It feels like things, like I said earlier, are getting ratcheted up, right? There's a feeling of, I wouldn't say anxiety, but of immediacy, right? That what we're doing here is mattering, that there's some things moving. And the reason why I say that in particular is the Middle East, of course, right? There is something going on over there for sure, with the war and with the battle that's going on. And I guess it was 5 weeks to the day now that they had attacked, they being Hamas, have attacked Israel, right? With this October 7th attack. Horrible thing. Horrible, horrible, awful thing. I mean, executions, torture, beheadings, public rape. I mean, I can't go through the list of the things that took place on that because of, well, this is being recorded, and I don't want this to be shock and awe, but there are things that I can't even say from up here on this pulpit that they committed. And they've been likened to Nazis, but I'll just say this, the Nazis were at least humiliated, and they were at least ashamed of what they did. These people have recorded what they've done, and then they have released it. They are proud of what they've done. And look, my last name is Silverstein, okay? So I don't know if there's more Jewish last names than Silverstein. Maybe Goldberg, maybe Cohen, but Silverstein means I'm ethnically Jewish, okay? I don't practice Judaism. I'm sure you've been threatened to be a practicer of Judaism, keeping the Sabbath and all that. But I keep the Sabbath because it's God's ways, not because I'm Jewish per se. But anyways, I've had a lot of conversations about what it means to be a Zionist, what does it mean to be Jewish ethnically, what does it mean to be a practicer of Judaism, right? Those are all different things. But, so I'm obviously emotional about what took place. But I tried to set that aside because I found myself, I gave the last Great Day message, which was the day that the attack took place. I literally woke up to this news. I have family in Israel, just so you know, I have family that's there. I'd given the message on the first day for a group in Jerusalem. I basically was zoomed in, right? Have you heard of this, right? Go to meeting, these kind of internet meetings. I was zoomed into a group that was keeping the feast there in Jerusalem. They're okay, they're all right, but they texted me in the morning. I said, are you guys okay? They said, well, besides us not having any power, on the last Great Day, we sang a cappella, which was pretty cool. They had a good disposition about it. But nonetheless, all of this stuff starts to get pretty close to home. Things that I thought were really far off are all of a sudden on my doorstep. They're in the newspaper. They're my family that I'm worried about. And I found myself all of a sudden, I think it was Mike Tyson that said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? You got all these plans. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But when this actually happened to me, I was disoriented. I started to attack these people mentally, started to call them certain names, right? It's not Christian behavior. I don't care who you are. God has given his grace to all human beings, right? Everyone has an opportunity to be saved. Which is pretty big for me to say, right? To offer grace to the people who had just committed these attacks on my people. I can't really say that per se, but I do have family there. But I found myself condemning these people. And that's not good. That's not Christian behavior. But then then I started to think, well, they really were committing evil acts though. So what gives, right? Where do you find the line? What I started to think about was if you were a fly on the wall and you're looking at all of what was taking place, there are people who are keeping one way in life. That's us, right? We're keepers of the way. And there are others that are keeping another way, right? We could just look at it abstractly, scientifically, unimpassioned. There are people who are keeping one way and there are people who are up to another way of life. And that will help us to maybe figure out, not to vilify these people, but to just see them for what they are, which is they are doing something different than what we do. I want us to turn to Acts 24:14 to maybe express a little bit more about what I'm talking about here, to make a better case for it. And what we have going on here as you turn there is Paul's been imprisoned, okay? He's being brought forth before Ananias, who's a governor there. I'm sorry, before Felix. Ananias is the one who's bringing Paul. And he's going there because he has been rabble-rousing in the temple. I think if I remember correctly, Paul has brought in someone who's uncircumcised, right, into the temple. And so there were some problems. They arrested Paul. They brought him to Felix, who is this governor. And they've been attacking him. They've been basically, they just got done. Who else is there with him? Ananias, the high priest, these accusers, right? The Pharisees, they're all there. He says, our fathers. He's using inclusive language here. So he's setting himself aside, but he's also creating solidarity by using some of this language. And you'll see that here he does some more of that here in a second. I do serve the God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law. Okay? And it is written in the prophets. So this way that he just talked about includes what? The law and the writings of the prophets. Having a hope in God, which these men cherish themselves. Again, bringing them into the fold here, right? Saying we are here together, we serve the same God. They cherish God themselves. That there shall certainly be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. Maybe now he's off step with the Sadducees a little bit, right? They didn't believe in the resurrection, but he still is definitely creating some solidarity with the Pharisees here by claiming the resurrection. In view of this, I also do my best to maintain a blameless conscience both before God and before other people always. Now, after several years, I came to bring charitable gifts to my nation, to present offerings in which they found me occupied in the temple. Here he's bringing these offerings to the temple. Having been purified without any crowd or uproar, but there were some Jews from Asia who ought to have been present before you today, as they should have been bringing charges, if they should have anything against me. So these guys who had accused him, they weren't even there, right? If they actually had knowledge of this, they should have been present. They weren't. Or else these men would have declared that what violation they discovered me when I stood before the council, other than in regard to this one declaration which I shouted while standing among them, for the resurrection of the dead, I am on trial before you today. Okay, fair enough. He's making his defense, but imagine this. This is a big deal. I don't know if we understand how important the high priest is, okay? This would have been this would have been on the front news, right? This would have been on the news. Paul of Tarsus is brought into the governor, would have been on the news, right? It would have been something that would have been a big deal. And so here he's being given a chance to make his defense. And what does he say? Almost the first thing he leads off on is saying that he's a keeper of this way. And he says it in a casual manner, does he not? He doesn't say it like I need to identify what I mean by the way. He just says, I'm the keeper of the way. And they say, oh yeah, okay, you're a keeper of the way. Okay, got it. And catch this, verse 22, but Felix, having quite accurate knowledge about the way, adjured them, saying, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will decide your case. That word there, the way, is hodos in the Greek. And that means road. I don't know if you've ever done a deep dive on this, but today I want us to really start to understand what he meant by the way. And it apparently was something that they were all picking up on, and I don't know if we're just reading right over it and going, oh yeah, the way. It's hodos, which is, if you go on for Strong's, that's 3598. And it really literally means a way, road, journey, path. The primary word that you use here for it, the primary usage of this word is for a road. So you'd say, hey, Blake, how do you get down to the local Walmart? Well, you're going to get out here, you're going to get on that hodos. You're going to go down until, you hit, the other hodos, which T's right there, and you're going to take a left. And that's how people would have used that word. Now, figuratively, it's a means or a modality. So that's kind of interesting. So, literally road, figuratively a way of life, or kind of what you do, right? How you go about things. And there's another time that this word was brought up, hodos, in Acts 9:2. You don't have to turn there. It's just when Paul, this is Saul actually, this is when before he had his conversion, says that he was asking for letters from him to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any belonging to the way, whether men or women, he might bring them in shackles to Jerusalem. So the people who are keeping this way, this figurative way of life, apparently you knew who these people were. You could see something about them. Maybe they're in the city. Maybe they kind of hang out together. I don't know. But apparently Paul how he wanted to distinguish these people, you people, me, is that we were keepers of the way. I actually had a hat made up for the feast as a gift. It has on here, Walker of the Way on here. It's printed on there, nice embroidered. And it has Acts 24:14. And, I thought this was pretty cool. Now, if you'd like a hat like this for $77.97, you can contact the home office and we'll send one down. No, I'm kidding. This is just something I had made up for friends and just as a nice little feast gift. But I thought it was kind of a modern equivalent of the tassels, where you wear these tassels and people no idea what are those little strings doing on your pants there. People don't know. But they might know what this is, which is kind of the modern equivalent. I keep the law, right? The tassels. Anyways, nice little gift. And nonetheless, this was before I gave this message. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give a message about the way because I think it's important. And I think it's an important way of looking at what we do. See, we say things like we keep the law and we observe the holy days, right? We say these things. And I think that they would not have said that. They don't say that when they're asked about who they were back in, the times during Jesus, right? So I keep the way. I walk on this road. So, okay, let's think about that for a little while. What does that mean when you're walking on a road? Well, you're walking on a road. It kind of conjures up this idea of other people on this road with you, right? Yeah, we walk this pathway together. And so I started to think about that for a while. I said, okay, well, a road usually gets hemmed in by two things called what? Ditches, right? Otherwise, it's a field. No, but you got these two ditches here. And you can think about this like on the right ditch, you maybe would say legalism, okay? We've been accused of that, have we not, right? Focusing too much on the law and not enough on what? Grace, right? Well, that begs the question about what's in the left ditch. Well, you probably beat me there. Grace is probably in the other ditch. Probably better to say cheap grace, because grace is important. It's good, right? So probably better to say cheap grace. Have you ever heard that term before? Cheap grace? Okay. Cheap grace is this idea of not appreciating the grace that has been given to you. You presume on the grace, right? And it's this mentality that people will have. Sometimes we tell people, well, you've just walked down the aisle and giving your hand to the preacher and your heart to the Lord, and you thought that was all you had to do. I got some news for you. There's some things that you have to do. If you've been converted, there are some fruits, are there not? Well, when you don't produce those fruits, you've taken on this idea of being a recipient of cheap grace, right? You don't appreciate. You act as though you're going to be forgiven. So you say, oh, there's this thing I want to do, and I know that God will forgive me, so I'm going to do it anyways. You follow me? So that's that cheap grace ditch. So we got legalism, and we got cheap grace here, and then we got the way in the middle. And what you'll do is, and this is kind of interesting, because you'll notice people in life that will be kind of more legalistic, right? They're asking you what's in the soup. They're asking what kind of casing's on the hot dogs. Nothing wrong with that, but just, these people are very conscientious. They might start, they're still on the road, right? But they're leaning more towards legalism. You follow? And then we got people on the left side. These are people that are a little more lackadaisical in their faith, right? They're not so concerned with these things. They're kind of more willing to, at the drop of a hat, to offer up a little bit of grace to people. And nothing wrong with that per se, but what I'm trying to say is there's a distribution of individuals on this road, right? It's not just one way. There's a lot of people that are walking this way with us, and some of us are leaning a little bit towards the legalism ditch. Some of us are a little bit more towards the grace ditch. And you could also think about these two ditches in another way. You should see how many times I say way at the end of this message. Count them. But there is, on the right ditch, there is this idea of being conservative. And you can make a case, I'm pretty sure a strong case, for legalistic folks are more conservative than the cheap grace people, right? The sloppy agape people, which is basically, that's kind of a derogatory term. I shouldn't say that, but then the left ditch is going to be more progressive or liberal based people. Now, I'm not using political terms. It might be, those are technical terms, by the way. Conservatism and liberalism, those are two different terms that are used for any kind of system of thought or any kind of religion or any kind of politics as well, right? We hear that a lot in politics, but those are not necessarily only for politics. Conservatives are trying to conserve the way that we've always done things, right? They're the folks that tell you this is tradition. This is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it. Well, fair enough. But there are moments in time when those old traditions are outmoded, right? They don't apply anymore. It's because we're nested in culture, right? So you have to have both. You have to have conservatives and you have to have liberals, okay? Now I know I've had to take a poll in here. I'm guessing we have a lot of conservative folks in here. Fair enough. I'm a conservative myself, politically. And even religiously, I feel like that we need to adhere to the things that we have done before. I think there's value in those structures, and they are old. But the liberal, Jesus was exhibiting both liberal and conservative characteristics. This is what's interesting, is that both are needed. Now, you would say the progressives are trying to adopt new ways to uphold the system in the face of culture or new trends, right? You have to respond to what's there in front of you and how to maybe modify what has been to make sure to preserve the communication of that thing. And I might be hopefully I don't lose you here, but what I'm trying to make a case for is both are needed here. And then both are similar to legalism and sloppy agape or cheap grace. Now, we would ask this question. When do you go too far on the right and you end up in the ditch? You're no longer on the way. You're no longer keeping the way of Jesus Christ. And I would say this, Charles Gross and I were talking about it. It's when you uphold the letter of the law over the spirit of the law. That's when you've gone too far to the right. You are so focused on not working on the Sabbath that you'll let that ox die in the ditch. Right? I said, no. Life takes precedence over the law. Let's go and grab that ox, make an exception, right? Pull it out of the ditch. All right, well, what about, that begs the question, what about the left? When you go too far to the left, when you end up in the ditch and you're no longer on the way. We talked about it earlier. It's pretty simple. It's whenever you act in a way that presumes on God's grace. That's when you've gone too far. Fair enough. I beat that up. But I love that visualization because it really does allow for people in the church that maybe don't see it the way that we see it to have a little bit of grace, a little bit of space. So yeah. So-and-so, they're really, really worried about these certain things, right? They're pretty legalistic. I'm a little more easygoing. I'm a little, I might do things on the Sabbath that you wouldn't do, right? But we're still brothers and sisters, are we not? See, too quickly are we willing to vilify those that are in the church and really on that road with us, I feel. So this allows for a little distribution is what I'm trying to say here. A little bit of grace, a little bit of length here. And this is also what's pretty interesting is Paul was not only describing who he was and what he did and how he kept his life, which they would have understood, he was also reaching all the way back into the Old Testament and pulling forth something before them, which was this idea about what was described as these kind of people. See, it's not just a New Testament thing to liken a road to a modality of life or to a type of way that you live your life. It's also in the Old Testament. The word that's used for way is derech, and it is Strong's 1870. And again, it literally means a road or a pathway. That's the primary usage. And it was frequently addressed and used in relation to the way of Yahweh, right? You find this, the way of Yahweh. You would also see this is what's found in Genesis 18:19. I have chosen him that he may commandeth his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice. See, I think it's been this way for a while. Since the very beginning, really. The very first time you come across this word or this idea of a road or a pathway is in Genesis, when it's talking about coming out of Eden. The way was protected by what? 2 cherubim, right? What did the road lead to? The trees. So it goes all the way back. And this is what Paul's reaching all the way back to that Old Testament, breeding continuity through the whole scriptures, all the way to that present day, which was the New Testament. Isn't that crazy? These are concepts that have been, you look for these ideas that make their way throughout all of Scripture. They're what's called through lines, okay? They're true no matter what time and what place you utter them. These are things I think we can really hang our hat on. We get too bogged down in speculative things that are smaller, hard to prove things. They're speculative. You look for things that are thematically true throughout all of Scripture, and this is one of them. I think I can make a strong case for it. Derech is actually I believe it is a parent word. So I'm not going to give you a Hebrew lesson here today, but Hebrew is a bit peculiar in the fact that there are root words, okay? Then from the root word, you would have a parent word that comes up, okay? And then from that parent word, you have children words. They make sense, right? You have these things that they extrapolate from. But you get some really cool words like derech. But if you know the root word, where it comes from, you get some kind of cool new meaning to that one word. So derech means way, or literally means to point to, okay? So it's kind of more of a way or pointing to the way. It's pointing to the pathway. I'll give you an example here. Psalms 1:2. I believe that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah. Sorry, no, Psalms 86:11. There you go, Psalms 86:11. And so, we're talking about this way of, the derech, which comes from Yerah. I don't get it too technical here, because the point being here is that this word derech means to point. It says, teach me your way, right? Teach me your way. Psalm 86:11. Teach me your way. And it could be translated literally, point me in the direction of your path. Okay? So we got this kind of cool, we point to the pathway to God, the way of Yahweh. And the root word, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because it's really difficult, but it means migration. Okay? So you have this word. So what is associated with the way is a type of migration. And aren't we migrating, y'all? Aren't we migrating from here to God's kingdom? Aren't we trying to have this kind of sojourning, right? We're here together on this road. Get this picturing of us migrating together, maybe kind of holding our hands, walking our way home, so to speak, right? Kind of kumbaya, but it's kind of got a nice visualization to it. So we have all of that. I beat this whole way up, we get it, the way. Old Testament, New Testament, way of life, to really point to this one thing. Before I do that, I want to say just that we have a tendency to try to go our own way, don't we? Right? You see a lot of stories inside the Bible that talks about, that they, it's in Isaiah 53:6. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. You see story after story in the Bible of people who say they have a better idea. I got a shortcut. I can figure out a faster way to do this. And all those shortcuts in life seem to turn into cul-de-sacs. We're on I got this new way of doing this thing. It's like, man, please just stick to the way. Please stick to those pathways we know. It really is, it's important because if you think about it practically, if we're all on our own way, how is God going to get us together to go any direction? Right? God is trying to contend with a bunch of people's free will. And if you have a bunch of people going on their own farm to market roads, right? They're all, out here going this way and that way and the other, and they're not on the way and going in the direction they're supposed to be going. How do you get anything done? Right? It's as much a practical issue living this way as much as a moral issue. And to build a really strong case for why I desperately feel that we need to be on this way and resist the urge to go our own way, I want us to turn to 1 Kings 22:22. And what's going on here is we have King Ahab, bad dude, right? One of the bad kings. Is going to meet with Jehoshaphat, who's the king of Judah. Right? We had the two kingdoms, right? They're split up. Remember this? And basically, Ahab's kingdom had been at war with the Arameans for a while. This group of people, and he's invited Jehoshaphat up to kind of have a treaty together, right? Have a little powwow about how we're going to go up to Ramoth Gilead, which is a city, and to retake this territory. And to set the scene here a little bit, Jehoshaphat, agrees to meet with Ahab. So they meet together, and Ahab gathers all these, remember the 400 prophets? He gets all these prophets together, and they're all there, and they're doing their song and dance, quite literally. And they're saying, oh, king, right, you're going to win this war. Oh, you're going to win this battle there. God, the Lord's going to hand this over to you. And he's kind of, Ahab, is getting his little chest is all puffed up, right? He said, all right, you satisfied, Jehoshaphat? Or are we together? Are we good to go? And Jehoshaphat says, yeah, he knows, right? These guys are a bunch of sycophants is the technical word, but they're basically a bunch of bootlickers, right? And he says to him, do you have a priest of Yahweh here? Do you have one of those, He said, yeah, we got one of those. But I hate that guy, He never tells me anything good, right? He's always giving me bad news. He's giving you the truth is what's the issue, right? Do you want a yes man or do you want the truth? And that's Micaiah. And Micaiah, comes forth before him, and this is what he has to say. And Micaiah said, picking it up in 19, verse 19, 1 Kings 22:19. And Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and the angels of heaven, which some of you might have the host, the heavenly host, yeah? Do you have heavenly host? Okay, yeah. The host of heaven, standing by him on his right and on his left. Okay, so we have this group of angels, which angels is evangelion, which is basically messenger, right? We have these messengers, divine beings, host of heaven, obviously divine, there with him on his left and his right. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab to go up and to fall at Ramoth Gilead? So God's asking this host here, who's going to entice Ahab to go fall? And one spirit said this, while another says that. Then a spirit came forward, who pick me, and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, how? Okay, so, the critics on this will say, this is just God being anthropomorphized. It's a fancy way of saying that, just giving you a metaphor about the way that God works. Well, this is a really in-depth I mean, he's talking to the Spirit's coming forth. I mean, there's a lot going on here. I don't buy it. I think this is actually an account of what took place, personally. And he said, I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all the prophets. And then he said, you shall entice him, and you will also prevail. Go and do so. Now then, behold, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all the prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared a disaster against you. So it's like, God, it's strange, right? Does God need partnership? I mean, he's all powerful, right? I don't think he needs us at all, but he seems to want us. Right? I mean, he says, look, he kind of listen, and he's also all-knowing, right? So didn't he already know before asking this question? I mean, there's some interesting things here, right? I think God, he wants family, right? I mean, we love this idea that he wants us to be a part of his family. He wants cooperation. And it looks like that God works by committee. You ever thought about that? Okay. So a lot of people just think about God's up there, God, God the Father, God the Son. They're not really getting much input, right? Apparently there's a whole lot of activity going on up there in God's throne room. I could tell you to go to Job 1:2, where God is surrounded by the sons of God, likely angels, right? We could also go to Psalms 82:1, where God presides over the great assembly, which is in heaven. He renders judgment amongst the gods, little g gods. We have Psalm 89:5 and 7. I could go on. And heavenly beings being mentioned. Isaiah 6, we're talking about the seraphim that he's surrounded by, being praised. Daniel 7:9. I mean, I could go on. There's a lot. The point is this. Here's the main thrust. Again, if God is working by committee, he can only work with you if you're on that road, going the direction you need to be going. Otherwise, he can't work with you. It's not about a morality thing. It's about a practical thing. We got to be on that road if we want to be used by him in a mighty way. So being on this transcendent road with God, and dare I say his divine counsel, is a way that God tries to work with all of humanity. You got to be on the road, y'all. Learning more about these ideas about that were the ancient people would have been picking up on, right? All these translators were really at the mercy of the translators, right? And so we have to look at those translations and kind of come to grips with understanding what they would have heard and how they would have understood things. We're so far removed. Someone said to me once, he said, you can't tell me what it means now, Blake, until you can tell me what it meant to them back then. And it's so true. So many dishonest individuals will use these kind of confusing things to their advantage. I think the best we can do is try to understand what it meant to those folks and to see how we're similar. They're still looking for the same things. They're still worried about some of the major things. We're not so different than them. They're worried about taking care of their family. They're worried about getting to heaven. They're worried about being good people. Those are things that transcend time. And hopefully by understanding these nuanced meaning of these words, derech and hodos, we can understand those ancient authors a little bit better, and by extension, Yahweh, Elohim. Now this interpretation will challenge a superficial or a privatized faith. Say that again. This interpretation, this understanding, will challenge people who want to put up guardrails over that way. You can't. This is an invitation from God over and over again to walk in this way. It's a public road, right? Anyone can get on that road. And so we will have to, continue to make a case for why we want to invite people. Have you been inviting people to walk this way? Have you related to it like a way of life? Would they see you like Paul saw those people who were keepers of the way and know exactly that he could rest them? You know what I mean? Well, people see you in your life and know that you're on that way. Are we walking the transformative way of Christ in all areas of our life? Or have we reduced the way to a minor side path, detached from the lifestyle that we live in our community? Recapturing this original meaning compels us to embody the way in ethical living and showing Christ-like love. See, the path is known as Jesus. And he described it as, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life.